Section 2. Positive behavioral strategies and restrictive measures.
Positive behavioral strategies. Positive behavioral strategies are proactive approaches to changing challenging behavior. Some examples of positive behavioral strategies are prompting and nonverbal signals. Positive behavioral strategies encourage you to see behavior as a form of communication. Every behavior sends a message about what a person needs. Some messages are easy to read, some need more deciphering. Instead of reacting to challenging behaviors, you can proactively reduce them. Here's how positive behavioral strategies can help DSPs do that. Help build a trusting relationship between DSPs and the people they support. Instead of seeing someone's behavior as a problem, practice empathy by looking at the people you're supporting with compassionate curiosity. With this view, you can shift your focus from fixing people to understanding them. You can also develop a more collaborative relationship with people by working together to understand when and under what circumstances a behavior occurs. Reinforce new skills. Once you understand why a person is behaving a certain way, you can respond more effectively. You can help them learn new behaviors that serve the same purpose, like how to follow directions or ignore peer distractions. Prompt you to consider multiple reasons for behavioral difficulties. Challenging behavior can happen for many reasons. People may not have the language or communication skills to express what they need, or the behavior could be a way to avoid a difficult situation or task. In other cases, some people may be reacting to an environment that is not supportive of their needs. Or there could be a cultural difference, which may prompt you to take a culturally responsive approach to analyze the behavior and your response to it.
Behavioral support strategies. In the past, the first choice in addressing risky behavior often included techniques like denying food, applying restraints, or using medications to control a person. Today, laws have been passed to ensure that people with disabilities are treated as equal citizens with the same rights and freedoms given to Ohioans without disabilities, and are empowered to promote their dignity, respect, and trust. Restrictive measures. Some have behavioral support strategies in place to help support and protect them. These strategies may include restrictive measures, and it is important to consider what you have learned about trauma-informed care when supporting people who require these. A restrictive measure is a method of last resort used to keep people safe, such as restraints, time-outs, or restricting a person's rights. Restrictive measures can be used in a behavioral support strategy when there is a direct and serious risk of physical harm to the person or another person, risk of eviction, arrest, or incarceration. Ohio's rule governing behavioral support strategies that include restrictive measures provides instructions about what you, as a DSP, can and cannot do, and what you should and should not do based on any behaviors that you may see. Prohibited measures. Prohibited measures are actions that a DSP, under no circumstance, can take. The following actions are all prohibited measures and should never be utilized while you are supporting someone. If you are asked to implement a prohibited measure or observe a prohibited measure being implemented, you should report it as a potential MUI immediately. Disabling a person's communication device. Restraints in which the person lies face down. Denial of breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, or beverages. A restraint that has the potential to inhibit a person's ability to breathe, or one that is medically contraindicated, meaning it could have an adverse effect on the person's physical health. Placing a person in a room with no light. Subjecting a person to damaging or painful sound. Application of electric shock to a person's body. Subjecting a person to any humiliating or derogatory treatment. Squirting a person with any substance as an inducement or consequence for behavior. Using any restrictive measure for punishment, retaliation, instruction or teaching, provider convenience, or as a substitute for specialized services. Non-restrictive measures. Providers must attempt actions or supports that are non-restrictive to address the risk of harm before a restrictive measure can be approved and put in a person's ISP. After the non-restrictive actions or supports have been tried and failed, the county board must assesses the behavior, develop support with the person's team, get informed consent from either the person or their guardian, Seek approval from a Human Rights Committee, HRC. Types and limitations of restrictive measures. Time out. Restriction of a person's rights. Chemical restraint. Mechanical restraint. Manual restraint. Unapproved behavioral support. Court-ordered restrictions. Time out. A time out can be one of two actions: physically removing a person from their immediate environment and placing them in a different setting, and preventing the person from leaving. Preventing a person from leaving a specific area. Restriction of a person's rights. Any restriction that impinges upon the rights of a person with a developmental disability, as listed in the Rights of People with a Developmental Disability. For a dietary restriction to be approved, there needs to be a clear, serious, and relatively immediate risk of harm should the recommended diet not be followed. For example, a physician orders that consumption of soda pop be limited to 1 can per day as a means of controlling weight and possible future medical problems. In this case, the risk cannot be reasonably stated to be in the near future or a certainty. However, if a physician orders a textured diet, or else the person has a high risk of choking, a rights restriction could be put in place. Chemical restraint. A chemical restraint is a medication prescribed to treat sexual offending behavior. A medication may also be a chemical restraint if it unintentionally or intentionally bluntly suppresses the person's ability to complete activities of daily living. The use of a device to restrict a person's actions, such as wrist straps, mittens, or a harness in a vehicle. If a mechanical restraint must be used to avoid the risk of harm, then the provider must cease restraint immediately once the risk of harm passes. Do not cause pain or harm the person. Do not restrict the ability to breathe. Manual restraint. Hands-on method that restricts the head, neck, one or more limbs, or the entire body using enough force to cause the possibility of injury. It includes holding, disabling, or blocking a person's wheelchair or other mobility devices. If a manual restraint must be used to avoid the risk of harm, then the provider must maintain constant supervision. Cease restraint immediately once the risk of harm passes. Do not cause pain or harm the person. Do not restrict the ability to breathe. Unapproved behavioral support. In a crisis or emergency, restrictive measures may be needed to ensure a person's health or safety. For example, to prevent a person from being hit by a car, a DSP uses a safe, manual hold to stop them from falling into a busy street. In ensuring the person's safety, the DSP has used a restrictive measure not written in the person's ISP. Anytime a restrictive measure is used without HRC approval, the incident must be documented and reported as an unusual or major unusual incident. Court-ordered restrictions. Not considered restrictive measures for purposes of behavioral support planning, and are not subject to HRC review. However, care must be taken to ensure that actions used to support or implement the court order are not restrictive. For example, if a person is prohibited by a court from consuming alcohol, and a support team proposes to search the person's room for hidden alcohol, then this would be considered a violation of rights. The court simply ordered the prohibition of alcohol use, not to search the person's room.
Scenario: Hannah. Multiple incident reports show that a person used support, Hannah, is banging her head against the walls of her home, causing bruises, cuts, and other injuries to her head and face. Hannah and her team meet to review the reports and look for possible causes for her behavior. Hannah and her team revise her service plan to include positive behavioral support strategies and non-restrictive measures to support her, including verbal redirection. Verbal redirection includes using a calm tone, neutral body language, and clear, concise instructions telling the person exactly what they are doing incorrectly and what they should be doing instead. A few weeks later, it is clear that these supports are not working, as she continues to hurt herself. Hannah's SSA seeks feedback from other team members, including Hannah's physician. An assessment is completed to define the targeted behavior, analyze the information, and determine the reason for the behavior. Hannah's physician recommends that Hannah wear a soft helmet, considered a mechanical restraint, as soon as she begins to hit her head against the wall. To start using the helmet, the SSA must receive informed consent from Hannah's guardian and approval from the local Human Rights Committee, or HRC. After Hannah's SSA receives consent from the guardian, The SSA submits the informed consent documentation, which includes important information gathered by the DSP, including incident reports and data showing that non-restrictive measures were tried and failed, to the HRC. The HRC approves the use of the restrictive measure, the helmet. Hannah's plan is revised, and Hannah's DSPs are trained to use the helmet. Every 90 days, this restrictive measure is reevaluated by the HRC to ensure it is still needed or if it can be discontinued. Scenario: Christina. Christina has been arrested multiple times for shoplifting. The court has warned her that if it happens again, she may go to jail and orders her not to put herself in a position to shoplift again. Christina and her team meet to discuss why she is feeling the need to shoplift and looks for causes. To better support Christina, the team decides to convert her weekly spending money to daily spending money. Christina will also attend weekly impulse control support group meetings. The team updates her service plan to reflect the new supports. A few weeks later, Christina shoplifts again, and it is clear that the non-restrictive measures that the team put into place are not working. The team proposes a one-on-one supervision level for Christina when she is in the community to ensure she does not shoplift, which goes beyond the original court order. This restriction is a rights restriction. Christina agrees to the measure, and the team submits justification for the restrictive measure to the HRC. After the HRC approves the measure, Christina's SSA updates her service plan to reflect the restrictive measure and trains her DSPs on the new support. Every 90 days, this restrictive measure is reevaluated by the HRC to ensure it is still needed or if it can be discontinued.